We're joined by Jesse Kotton.
Hello.
Probably one of the best Yu-Gi-Oh players in the world.
Thank you.
Welcome to Europe. How are you feeling today?
Feeling alright. Managed to sleep a bit on the plane. It's not overly jet lagged.
Okay, that's awesome. So how about we jump straight basically into some questions on how people can either improve but also get to know you a little bit. So basically a little bit of everything.
Sure.
So the first question, of course, we're here in Europe. Are there any players that you think are like a threat when you come into like a big event like a YCS Dortmund? Like anyone you really want to face or not want to face?
I mean, I think we know the major players here in Europe. There's a lot of them. Some standout ones include Rafael Nevin, Joshua Schmitz. Those are the two probably biggest standouts to me, but there are plenty of other fantastic players. Dinka Bowie, obviously had great success recently as well and in the past. Herman Hansen, Vladis Baranovskis. A lot of good players here for sure. Just, I could probably keep going, but it takes some time to think of them,
We were just in YCS Pasadena.
Yeah.
That was a really quick one. You got another really major event result, a really strong result, back to back it seems. How do you feel about that? Like, what was it like to be in the finals once again?
It's not as much pressure for me anymore. I've been in the position a lot of times, and for me, the worst case is getting second, which happened.
I see.
So while that's not what I want, I'm still happy with it. It's still a great result, and it's a position I've been in before, so I don't feel like it's that much of a roller coaster for me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Even though, some people might sometimes meme about it, you're even laughing a little bit yourself right here. To me, it's about consistency. Like, I find it far more impressive if someone's like, consistently just smashing top after top after top, especially if it's like a high-end finish. But do you feel then, because you mentioned second being like the worst, would you rather have a fourth?
No. Second's definitely not the worst. I mean, like, once you make it to the finals,
Okay.
given the two options there are, I'd rather go first.
Okay.
I'm very happy at second still. Like, come up to like a fourth in Brazil, I'd much rather get second.
Okay, makes sense.
The farther I get, the better.
Yes.
So a lot of people will feel way worse about the second if they've never won before. That one can sting, right? Because it's something you're chasing to get.
Yeah.
I have achieved that, so it's absolutely something I want, but it's not like as strong of a hunger that some other duels may have.
Yeah.
Right. So like last weekend, while Hani is a YCS champion previously, people often kind of goad him on, saying, "Oh, it's a third of a YCS win. It was a 3v3."
Yeah.
Right. So he had a lot more of that hunger to actually get across that line. And I mean, I don't think I made any glaring mistakes in that match. Maybe I did. I can rewatch it, but he definitely wants it as well and played it very, very strongly. So.
Yeah.
And he managed to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is a difference for sure.
Yeah. They also make the meme pie. I don't know if you saw where they give him like one third YCS top on that was really funny. You got top 8 in the Decade tournament, if I'm not mistaken.
And you got top 4.
Top 4. Oh my bad. My bad. So top 4 in the Decade tournament, where you played something very different.
Yeah.
You played like a pile of Tyr, Ishizu, Thunder Dragons, and a bunch of stuff. Now, my theory was Jesse is playing this because he doesn't want to show his actual deck. But was that the case? Were you trying to hide like what you were actually playing for the YCS? Or was it actually something you considered like?
Ironically, it's something I considered because of how well I did in the tournament. When I'm not playing anything super competitive, and I mean, while the tournament had a lot of good players, the results didn't matter that much to me. So I wasn't super focused on doing well in it. Rather, I built a fun deck pretty quickly and then just tried enjoying myself because it's a game after all. And I love Thunder Dragon cards, Chaos cards, and the tier cards are pretty fun. So I threw just a mishmash together, and the deck is very, very flawed. There are some like flaws with the deck overall, and then like flaws with how I built the deck that I would absolutely change in hindsight. I just didn't, realize until after I started playing with it. And I was doing well in spite of that. So I did consider it briefly for the tournament after I'd played that finish. And then, considering that a tournament I didn't really care too much about doing well in, I didn't want to play anything I thought would be super surprising for the YCS. So while I didn't actually have a fully formed idea of what I was going to do for the YCS, and the one more techie option is what I ended up not playing with the YCS. I did rather want to keep that concealed because I don't really gain much by using it at that point.
Yeah, for sure.
Use it to learn and then save the good stuff for what I feel is important. Right?
Yeah, of course. So you mentioned loving Thunder Dragon cards. Personally, when I started following again, like Yu-Gi-Oh was around, I want to say 2018. It was actually you showing off all the Thunder Dragon, Danger, Wild stuff.
That is definitely one of my favorite decks of all time. I think specifically the version that had Snow, Dotscaper, the Dangerous Mathematician, that was a lot more free-forming and didn't have to have the dragon cards in there. It was just the thunder and the random stuff. That's probably my favorite deck of all time.
Oh, okay. So like a pile of engines, basically.
Yeah, because it was so free-flowing, and you really didn't you had a game plan, and you knew what you wanted to accomplish, but the way to get there, and a way to do it safely and efficiently was different almost every time, and I think that's some of the coolest way to play the game.
Right. Do you feel like Tier was like that before Ishizu, or it's starting to look like that? Or
so I think the middle stretch between the balance coming out and before Mama was kind of weirdest point for Tier, where I felt it was the most linear and had the least amount of options, because you don't have the power from the Ishizu stuff, and then you also lost the power from balance that was snow. I feel like there was other stuff as well. Was it just snow? Might have just been snow.
Yeah.
But that's so huge. Snow is such a big part of that deck, or it was. I think before the ban list, the deck played kind of similar to the deck I was just talking about, the Thunder Dragon deck.
Yeah.
Because a lot of graveyard effects working together, and then kind of snow is that backup there to really cement you with disruption and follow-up. And so kind of that in-between period, it was not as powerful and it was not as interesting.
Yeah.
But I think outside of that period, so before and now, it is kind of like that with how many options there are in different ways. But I think something that's notable about both that is often overlooked is now that with the Ishizu stuff, you have flexible quick effect disruption from your graveyard, right? And that I like those type of effects a lot. Or even something like Gizmek, which was played before, because it means when you have no resources in hand or field, you're still playing with more interaction through your graveyard as well. And I think when you can have proper interaction off floodgates with as many ways as possible, and you get these complex game states, that's what I really find enjoyable.
Right. So would you say then Snow was kind of like a Book of Moon from Grave, while Mudora and Keldo are kind of like a Crow from Grave, and that's how they are comparable in a way?
Yes, but you can actually take it a step further, right? Because when you have the field spell up, Polareno, those shufflebacks can turn into a pop.
Oh, right.
So you actually can take it a step further. When you had a field disruption with Snow, you can still maintain that at any time you have the field spell in Shellmans now. And that's very, very, very relevant. So
right.
It often does take that place to the point where if you have a Polareno, it becomes significantly harder for your board to be cracked.
Right. I don't know, you probably saw Dominic Couch playing a bunch of Rainbow Bridges.
Yeah, so I joked about the idea that I didn't bring. That was the idea. I worked with Dominic Couch on that deck. I originally only had one bridge in there, and I played Goods instead. What he ended up going with was the 3 bridge, because Goods was way worse into Dweller, and he'd rather be able to draw it, discard it, and mill it more consistently, which, in retrospect, I was correct. It was a good call on his part to kind of take the idea further. But that was something we talked about because of that, but also because Mystic Mine is a very strong card that people aren't prepared for.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, it's actually better going first in a specific format, because when you're both playing on your first turn, that's when they have no ability to use their extra deck negates properly.
Right.
And then you can just throw Mystic Mine down, clear your own field.
Allegedly, there's a tweet that explains people that they should be prepared for Mystic Mine, right?
I me and Dom tested that deck together, and other people as well. So I was very aware that that's something that could happen to me, and that is one of the reasons Heartbeat was in my main deck. I didn't want to just get blown up by a Mystic Mine. I was prepared for it. So oftentimes, if I could afford to search something else off Kit Colors, I would search Heartbeat, because even if they don't Mystic Mine, the card still forces out a Solic or a Crime.
Yeah, for sure. You can also use it to stop them from having a field spell when you're trying to crack your board. So we're currently already talking a little bit about Ishizu Tier. It's a Tier 0 format, as some people say. A lot of people are angry about that. Some people are very excited for it. What are your thoughts a bit on it right now?
Personally, from my competitive player standpoint, it's a good format. Yeah. It's not perfect. There is still variance involved, as you're always going to have, and maybe a little more than I'd still like, but it does reward better plays, better deck building more frequently than some of the formats we've had in the past. That is something that, as a competitive player, I love to see. However, it does a couple things to the game that aren't healthy. It makes watching incredibly hard and getting into the game incredibly hard.
Right.
So when we're trying to grow a competitive scene, or introduce new players into the game, grow streams, it's not really conducive with that as an ecosystem. So while it's cool now, it does have to be addressed at some point. I don't know if there's ever a way to balance it out fully. That would be the dream for Konami, but if they could do it, they probably would. They'd want to satisfy everybody, but easier said than done.
Right. So one thing you mentioned there was addressing it. So if there was a ban list tomorrow, and I know it's a bit early, but any time, how would you address it? If there's a dream Kotton ban list right now, what's the one?
Well, that's the thing. Dream for me would be not doing too much, right? Because I still
Yeah.
have the tier cards intact. I prefer it.
Mhm.
What's the best way to deal with Chalmers? Well, the obvious one is probably hitting Kit Kalos. Just
Ooh.
ban. I mean, that would be a strict like hard hit to the deck. Because the deck loses extension, consistency, and access to Will Kalos as well.
Yeah.
Hitting it in other ways is so hard, right? Because as we see with what's happening in Japan, the deck has so many tools that hitting some means they just switch to the slightly worse ones. So you need to do a good amount. I don't really have a good answer because I haven't really thought about it too much. I haven't tested it too much. And I'd be hoping someone making that ban list in R&D would thoroughly, like, I guess, test and make sure what they're actually trying to achieve is achieved.
Right.
Like maybe I could hypothesize just strictly like reducing the number of names in their decks. They can't just play a mill heavy deck, and they can't just throw a bunch of tiers in the grave very consistently. Maybe like limit, semi-limit, semi-limit. So there's only 5 like tier names to mill. Where now they can't rely on just milling 8, hitting a bunch and popping off. They're forced to play it a lot more slow, calculated, with the chance of popping off more. But maybe that's also a bad thing, right? Because if it's more varying space, that may piss off more players more often.
Yes, it'd be like opening a call by and you're like, oh,
exactly, right? So
yeah.
I'm not just making that suggestion, but maybe just thoughts. I'm not saying out loud.
We're both fans of like dark piles or tier limits or these types of decks then. However, let's say you could change something on the ban list that isn't tier, just as a game health in general perspective. You can be greedy, you can be you can choose. Would there be something else? Maybe like a dweller ban or something?
Okay, so my obvious pet fave would be Snow to be unbanned. I love that card so much.
Yeah.
I don't think the card's unhealthy. It punishes the boring decks, which is like normal summon and that's it. Like Brain Kids or hope my normal summon Jet works. Like it doesn't even beat Flu because they just keep going, right? It beats the very boring normal summon past decks, and I have no problem with those decks being bad. So I like Snow because it creates so many unique gameplays, and I think when you get to these weird value wars where now your graveyard has meaning attached, it means that you have to be very, very calculated with all your decisions. That is so interesting to me. Like, Snow is just so cool in so many ways. So I'm sad to see it gone. And I think now with Bistrills and the cheesy stuff, even now, like it's even worse now because they can get rid of it so much easier.
Yeah.
I really would have liked to see it stick around. But aside from that, Dweller is a big one. I want to see banned. I don't like any lingering floodgates that you can't answer after the fact because you can't play searchable cards to deal with it. You can't draw untune out afterwards. So, I mean, that's pertaining to more stuff like D-Barrier, Scythe, Droll, Lancia, Shifter. Each have different levels of brokenness and they also change in how good they are each format, right? So while Lancia is not a card that's good at all right now, at least in theory, it very well could be in 6 months' time if we're playing a banished deck.
Right.
And that could be the card I'm kicking myself over when they play. So I like avoiding cards like that unless they're very, very well designed. So like Spellbound's one where I think it's fine enough because it's very it's designed knowing that's what it's going to do. So it's not going to be insane.
Hyper specific.
And even then it's not crazy, right? Like if you summon after the fact, those cards aren't affected. The other stuff is I don't love the super generic extra deck cards because it creates all the decks into the same thing and you can kind of get away with doing anything. So Anaconda DP was not interesting to me. That was every deck doing the same thing. There are other cards that do the same thing. Like right now, like Appaloosa, Dweller does that too. These bombs that any deck can make, I don't like that. I like that. I want each deck to be able to do its own thing and then.
So access code, or is that already fine? Access
code is weird. It's like kind of middle ground. I don't know if it's powerful enough to be too bad, but it does kind of fall on that radar. I think it's the going second card, which automatically makes it not as much of a problem. It is very strong though, so I could see it being something that falls in line with what I'm saying and could be a problem, but there's way, way bigger threats.
So one thing that I noticed is that prep for major events has evolved a lot over the past years. Like back when going back to 2018 and so forth, I feel like a lot of your testing was a lot on your own and then with a few people maybe. Whereas now I have the feeling that all the pros are all talking to each other. It's like you have WAF, E-Man, Luxury, and it seems like they're all morphing together constantly. So do you feel like preparation has changed much, or is that just an outside perspective?
I think it has to be an outside perspective.
Okay.
While there is some overlaps, because for the most part we're on good terms with each other, to varying degrees to being very close to just being friends.
Okay.
Like I'm in Discords with several of people from each of those groups,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of the times we won't go over deck theory. We're just hanging out. We're in those Discords.
I see.
It's possible players have the same ideas. It's possible something let something slip.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes there's some overlap, or sometimes a player is just in maybe both those groups and kind of bridges them together.
Testing with both.
So that does happen, but not all the time. I've started testing more people myself, partially because I have less time than I did in that period.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I need more hands to be helping me try out ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And more brains to kind of provide input. I don't think I'm personally as sharp and as like kind of on top of the game as I was maybe in 2019.
Okay.
So having more people to kind of give me feedback and test with makes up for that difference.
Okay, I see. So it's definitely not like every single circle is like warping into each
Yeah,
other.
it is a difference from years ago. It's not a huge difference, and it's not every circle warping together. Like I am friends with a lot of those guys.
I see.
But it's too much to include it all together. Like even from my own perspective, I don't like to be in large groups at once. So if there's a Discord call with like 12 people in it, I don't even want to be in it. I'd rather just, or if I join it, I'm silent.
Yeah.
So it's not really conducive for me trying to work on a deck. I'd rather keep it like 6 or less people.
I see, makes sense. So do you feel then, if that has changed somewhat the same, do you feel anything else has changed in terms of tournament preparation, like over these years? Anything you've noticed?
I think in the last few years, not much has changed. I think in the period that I was talking about, this may be like biased from my perspective, because what I was doing was I feel like online tournaments were firing a lot more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
There was like a big scene of like every group, like Australia group. I played in Australian online tournaments, luxury online tournaments, card overflow online tournaments. Some of these pages don't run anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I was way more into the game back then. I had more time and I was playing more. But I feel like I don't see as many of those going on.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, people are still grinding DB. They grind in private on DB. They grind regionals to practice every different way there is to test. I still see it happening.
Ironman as well.
Yeah, for sure. Because I'm less involved in that type of stuff now, last time, maybe I'm just seeing less of the Ironmaning in the cash tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think there's less of it. So that just might be my perspective thing.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, there's not much change. The real change would have been from like years before when Dueling Book didn't exist. But
I see.
that's far gone.
We have a new set already out in Japan right now. I believe it's
Photon
Hypernova.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have like any thoughts on that set already, or have you just not looked at it because you have YCS?
I've looked at it briefly, but there's so much on my plate right now that it's not been at the forefront of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I plan on going to Sydney after Dortmund and Costa Rica. So, I mean, from like literally just a week ago, I had 4 YCSs coming up with that don't include these cards. So it's not been something that I've paid too much attention to.
Mm-hmm.
I like to read all the cards, partially just because I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read the OCG reports to keep up, and also from like a vendor's perspective to keep up with the cards. They're going to go up in value. So I have like a decent understanding, but I've not got to the point where I formed my own ideas or opinions on the cards. Like anything I said would probably be spitting back what I read off of an OCG meta report, not any of my own opinions.
I see, okay. So you mentioned the vendor perspective there. Do you feel like beyond connections, because we know like if you travel a lot to these events, you're forming connections with a bunch of vendors and people who might have cards, but do you feel that the pro player in you, let's say, gives you an edge at selling cards as well?
Yeah, it can. So there's kind of 2 ways that I found to go about vending, or I mean, there's like 3. So the most common one is what you see people doing the most, which is just buy low, sell high. They go to Facebook groups, they go to locals, whatever, they sell cards at a discount, or they buy cards at a discount and then try to sell them for more than they paid. Mm-hmm. And the card prices themselves online haven't fluctuated at all.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'll do that sometimes, but that's not my major income model. The one that I was going to talk about that can really get in from being a pro player is looking at it almost like a stock or like you're trading. Mm-hmm. And you're looking at cards you think have potential to go up. And it's not all from the perspective of competitive. Mm-hmm. It could also go up from a collector standpoint, but pretty much you're trying to figure out what card is going to have demand to go up and doesn't have the supply to keep at the current price for that demand, right? So some examples of some hits, Reasonable Angler, for example. We've seen a common trend of old commons going up when they aren't reprinted, and it's been years since they've been printed, and they're played in meta decks.
Right, it's like Ladybug, Scattershot.
They were $1 online, some guy had 100 of them listed. It was an easy buy for me, like 8s now in TCG. that was a good one for me.
Mm-hmm.
You have misses as well. Some aren't old cards, like some are like penny stock purchases that I buy and hope they'll go up later. Like the Gister Emerald from Little Overload, they're 15 cents or 20 cents on TCG Player. I figure I can get back 8 to 10 cents in bulk if they whiff. So my risk isn't crazy high. I bought a couple hundred copies, which isn't even that much. And then the hope is that maybe I can get them for like $2, $3 later down the line. Right. That hasn't happened yet. I also still haven't lost faith. They may hit that later, but those are the type of things that I'd look at. It's not just that though, right? Like it's also collectibles as well. So like I do both, but yeah.
Yeah, like LOB, first edition, that kind of stuff. Cool.
And then I'll briefly mention the other way to make some money in the game is like an arbitrage, like to try and sell cards between regions where the prices are different. Mm-hmm. So something that I did kind of a little bit here. I'm busy and I didn't really feel like juicing that much value to the chip. I want to just relax. Mm-hmm. But like hellbacks in Europe are more than they are in America because they're short printed here. Yes. I have those cards because I'm opening a lot of products. So instead of selling them in America, I bring them here and then sell them at a premium. Yeah. So I don't need to do anything crazy. I'm just making the premium on the market differences, right? And inverse can go when you guys have a card cheaper. So like for one that was really strong last time I was in Germany for YCS was I think Bochum or Bocha, I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry.
Oh, Bochum. Yeah. Bochum, yeah, okay.
In 2018, common Seraphonites were, I got them for free here. No one actually cared about them. Okay. Some people would sell them for 50 cents, but they were like $12, I think, in America. So like, that's part of it. Like, swap cards back and forth at different values, and I can pay retail or above in either region and still make money. So that's one to diversify. I try to do as much of each type of strategies as I can, but yeah, those are kind of the ways you can make money vending.
One thing Patrick Hoban tends to say, I actually had him on the vlog the other day for YCS Pasadena. He mentions how deck building gives the most edge compared to technical play. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd agree. I think technical play isn't something you can just neglect. But if you come with a worse deck, you are just stacking odds against you from the get-go. But that being said, it also depends on the format. I think, like, in this specific format, I'm not even sure if my deck is perfectly built. And I think it's a very complex format from the playing perspective. Right. That technical play matters more. At this current moment, I think rarely, like, this isn't common. It matters more to just play better and to build better. That is very, very uncommon. But the main point there is that there's varying degrees of importance for each terms as the format goes along, right? So I think, like, if you go towards before Power of the Elements, I'd argue deck building was significantly larger than an average is. Yeah. And if you entered and made a good call with your deck list going into an event, that was the biggest thing. Yeah. And while there's little tricks to doing well with the decks and playing properly, it almost felt like comparing hands a lot of the points, which I hate, but that's where deck building is super, super important.
Awesome. So final question, and this is a very important one. What did you think of the Thrift diss track?
I loved it. Yeah, I mean, Triff's my homie.
Yes.
So I love to rag on him as well. So I mean, it was fun to watch. Yeah, a lot of valid disses on him. Stuff that we would also rag on him about.
Awesome. Okay, glad.
I'm trying to remember what some of the insults were, but there was some where I laughed. I'm like, I've said this to him enough times myself.
Oh damn. Okay, great to hear. Any final shout outs, like your store or something, anything along those lines?
Sure. So I mean, my store is just on TCG Player. So if you're looking at TCG Player, just get the best price. If that happens to me, I appreciate it. Don't feel the need to spend money just because it's me. Otherwise, shout out to my sponsor, Luxury Gaming. They help make me be able to go to all these events, which is something that I love. And then to everybody I test with. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. I will see you soon. Ciao.